Why you shouldn't worry about the different accents and dialects in Spanish. There's a big debate amongst Spanish learners and even native Spanish speakers about what country you should focus on, which accent, which vocabulary, all of these things. Well, what do I think as someone who's had to learn Spanish themselves? I personally think that you shouldn't be worrying about any of it, especially in the beginning. And here's why. First of all, welcome to the Michael Harper Spanish podcast. I was able to learn Spanish within a matter of months, and my goal is to show you how you can do the same. If you haven't already, be sure to check out my free masterclass training where I'll show you exactly how I was able to learn Spanish quickly, what I did and did not focus on, and the best resources to learn. Simply click on the link in the description or head on over to michaelharperspanish.com to sign up now. Let's get into this podcast episode. So one of the most common questions that I get asked is, which Spanish do I teach? Which Spanish should I learn? Now, one of the most common questions that I get asked is, which Spanish do I teach? Which Spanish should I learn? Should it be Spain, Argentina, Latin America? Which accent is best? Which one is the most neutral? And when you're starting out, you're not going to be able to distinguish different accents and dialects in Spanish countries anyways. If you're a beginner or an intermediate maybe, and I put a Spanish person, meaning a person from Spain, next to a person from Mexico and asked you to distinguish from which country they were from, you probably would not be able to. You'd have a really hard time doing that. So there's no point of worrying or stressing about these differences anyway, especially if you can't even identify them in the first place. And the differences between these Spanish-speaking countries doesn't matter that much anyways. I have a Latin American Spanish, but I have been to Spain 5 different times. I've even lived there for a few months. I've never had an issue communicating with anyone there. In fact, I even met tons of people from different Spanish-speaking countries like Argentina, Colombia, Mexico, Venezuela, even Puerto Rico. I've even met Europeans, people from different European countries whose second language is Spanish, meaning they were learning it, and it was broken Spanish, but I never had an issue communicating with them, and I never had an issue with understanding what they were saying to me. It's a lot like comparing the English between the United States and the English from England or Australia, for example. Obviously, there are some differences between the way that we talk, the accent, the words that we use, maybe some dialects, but we never have an issue communicating with one another. And it's very similar when you compare something like the difference between Latin American Spanish and the Spanish from Spain or even Argentina, for example. Now, here's what I recommend if you are someone that's worried about these differences. In the beginning, if you're a beginner or an intermediate learner and you are concerned about this, try to stay consistent with from what country the person that you're talking to is, or the people that you're talking to are from. What does that mean? If you have a Spanish tutor, try to find a tutor from the country that you're most interested in. If it's most relevant to you to learn the Spanish from Spain, maybe you're going to live there or study abroad in the future, find Spanish tutors that are only from Spain, or surround yourself with people that are only Spanish speakers from Spain. Now, don't freak out if you don't do this though. In fact, I personally recommend not doing this. I personally talk to people from different countries all at the same time when I was learning Spanish. I think it's actually more beneficial to gain this exposure and hear Spanish from different Spanish-speaking countries. So I would be talking to people from Argentina, from Venezuela, from Spain, from Colombia. I had friends who were from Mexico. So that is what I recommend doing because it's actually very interesting to learn about the differences between different countries, and it makes your Spanish even better. What's going to happen eventually, once you get to more of an advanced level and you're a lot more comfortable and fluent in the language, your Spanish is going to mold into the few people that you spend the most time with when it comes to Spanish speakers. My Spanish is basically a Venezuelan Spanish now. Why? Well, it wasn't always like that, of course. In fact, in the beginning, I spoke to way more people from different countries that weren't Venezuela than people from Venezuela. But once I started to become fluent and I could communicate fluently in Spanish, the people I hung out with the most happened to be from Venezuela. So my accent molded into a Venezuelan accent. The words I know are the words that are most used in Venezuela. But of course, I can talk to people from any country now. That's going to happen to you as well. Once you get to that level, the people that you spend the most time with, depending on what country they're from, your Spanish is going to become more like their Spanish. If you're living in Spain, in fact, I have a close friend of mine that I met in Spain when I was living there. He is currently living there and teaching Spanish right now in Spain. So his Spanish actually sounds like a person from Spain. He uses vosotros, which is a verb conjugation that we don't use in Latin America. So he uses that. He uses the words from Spain, the dialects, all of that stuff. So, but that's because he lives there and he teaches there and he's exposed to it the most. The same thing will happen to you, but that's not something that's going to happen to you in the beginning. So, what do I recommend? Expose yourself to all of these different dialects and accents and all of these different countries in the beginning, and don't worry about it. And if you're listening and watching on YouTube, be sure to subscribe for more videos. Leave a review on Apple Podcasts. And if you're listening on Spotify, be sure to download and follow to be notified of future content from me. And again, if you're serious about learning Spanish this year and want to become fluent as quickly as possible, learn how I was able to do it with my free masterclass. And be sure that you're following me on Instagram at Michael Harper Spanish for tons of daily new videos. See you in the next one. Thanks for listening.